Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for watching Behind the Gavel with Jason here this Friday morning in Kansas City. The show is sponsored by the KC Auction and Appraisal Company, and we're really excited today. If you have questions for either myself or my guest, Sarah, please post them below. We'll answer them as soon as we can. And also let us know you're watching. I'm really excited to bring on Sarah Reeder. Sarah is an appraiser in Fairfax, Virginia, with an amazing amount of history and knowledge in the field. And Sarah, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm honored to join you.
Thank you so much. And so for those of you who don't know who Sarah is, and if you're not in the appraisal world, you may not, but Sarah has her certified appraiser, a personal property designation for the International Society of Appraisers. She's affiliated with the AAA. She has a certificate program in appraisal studies and fine and decorative arts from New York University. She did her master's and undergrad work at the College of William & Mary. Also, she completed her certificate program in Museum Studies, Material Culture, and Early American History from National Institute of American History and Democracy. She's worked at the Smithsonian, the Library of Congress, Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. She's worked with auction houses around the country. She recently created Silver 101, which is an online course dedicated and designed to help individuals identify their silver and silver plate items. She is the co-editor of Worthwhile magazine. She's also written for Artwork Archive, Home Transition Pros, Digital Journal of Advanced Appraisal Practice, Journal of Advanced Appraisal Studies, of course, Worthwhile magazine. She's written for the ISA, the International Society of Appraisers, and so much more. Sarah, thank you again so much for joining us today. Your bio here tells me that I'm way over my head. You're much smarter and much more learned than I am. So I really thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Jason. That's a lovely introduction. No, I am really honored to be here today. And just amongst such an esteemed group of previous guests, I had a great time catching up on the previous episodes. And I encourage everybody to go back and check out my colleagues who were interviewed in the past. There's some really fascinating wisdom in those interviews. So thank you again.
Very, very cool. Thanks for the plug and the shout out there. So one of the first questions I ask all of my guests is, you've obviously been passionate about history and appraisals and objects and artifacts for a long time, because you don't look like you're more than about 35 years old, and you've got a lot of history here in this field. What led you to pursue this industry, this profession, and how did you get from NYU to where you are today?
Oh, well, I have to give my parents a lot of credit, particularly my mother. She loves antiquing. And so I have vivid memories as a tiny little kid being dragged to antique shows and feeling really bored. And then pretty soon it flipped over to I was the one dragging them to the antique shows. My parents I really do give them a lot of credit. I was fortunate to grow up near Washington, D.C. And so I would beg to go into the museums every weekend and see all of the art exhibitions that would come to the galleries in Washington. And they took me in every weekend. And so I had this amazing arts and antique education even before I finished high school. And I just, voraciously learned everything I could. And I was very fortunate also to go to William & Mary, which has an amazing program in both history, material culture, art history, and it's right down the street from Colonial Williamsburg. So at that time, I had unprecedented access to the curators at Colonial Williamsburg. And when I was still an undergraduate, I kind of crashed a gallery talk at Williamsburg, and I really, really wanted to work with Linda Baumgarten, who was then the curator of costume textiles at Colonial Williamsburg, and is just an amazing person, an amazing scholar. So she had a gallery talk, and I happened to go to it, and afterwards I sidled up and said, do you need an intern? I'd like to be your intern. And I'm very happy that college student me did that, because that was one of those decisions that changed the course of my career and the course of my life. And Linda, she didn't say, go away, why are you bothering me? She took me seriously, interviewed me, and I started working with her as an intern. And it was amazing, such an education. I got to shadow her, follow her through all of her curatorial work, help out with research and installing exhibitions. And they even let me write labels sometimes, present in the curatorial committees. So that was just a dream come true. And I loved that so much that I realized I wanted to stay and do my graduate studies at William & Mary so I could keep working with Linda and the other curators. And I did. I got my master's degree at William & Mary. I continued working with Linda and the other curators as my graduate assistantship, actually. So it was officially formalized from an internship to a graduate assistantship. So you never know what can happen when you crash a gallery talk. And then after that point, I always thought I was going to be a curator. I love museums. I still love museums, but it was in the recession and there were no museum jobs. So I was lucky to be able to land a job as a regular historian, not a historian of objects, at Colonial Williamsburg on a grant project. And I did that for a number of years, writing historical essays, but I desperately missed the objects. For me, it's always about the objects and the stories that they tell. So I eventually was able to return to the objects again, this time going into the auction industry. So I have great respect for what you do, Jason, because I've been on that side of the field and I know just how much work is involved in it. So I worked in the auction industry for a number of years as a subject specialist, cataloging every type of item imaginable that crossed my desk, which was a great education because if you didn't know about it already, you had to go learn about it. So that was a wonderful generalist education for a huge variety of objects. And I learned that I really, really love working very closely with clients and talking with them and how important certain objects are in their lives and respecting that. And I loved researching their objects. But what I found out is I hated selling the objects. So a little problem if you want to stay in the auction industry. So I thought, okay, I've got 2 out of 3 here. I need to hone this a little bit more. So that's how I ended up going back to NYU. I already had a master's degree from William & Mary, but knowing about objects and cataloging objects is not at all the same thing as being able to appraise objects. There's an entirely different methodology that you have to approach it with. So I went to New York University, and at that time they had this fantastic program in appraisal studies in fine and decorative arts. So I did that program while I was still working in the auction field. It was a lot of late nights juggling the 2 of them. And when I finished the NYU program, then I said, okay, I'm going to be an appraiser now. And that's when I opened my firm, Artifactual History Appraisal, and I've never looked back. It's a great fit for me.
That's awesome. And I apologize. I hit the wrong button when you started talking about yourself and you saw me look up. I was like, oh, hell, nobody wants to see me at this point. The joys of self-production on a video. I love what you said about working at an auction house, is that it's the best generalist education you could ever get.
Yes.
And I love it because I like to see and be around the things, but not necessarily own them.
Yes.
And now I'm paid to play with really cool antique stuff. It's really fun. And you do as well as an appraiser. You just don't get the commission, you just get the hourly, which is a completely different thing. So I know we're going to talk about your Silver 101 course. That's kind of what we started talking about, having you on today, because we love sterling silver here at the KC Auction Company. My history with it came when I moved to Florida, 25, almost 30 years ago with my wife. I never touched a piece of sterling silver in my life. I come from a small farm community, went down to Florida, was buying and selling at flea markets, and went to antique shows, saw these huge spreads of silver. I was like, what are these guys doing with this junk? And I realized it's not junk, it's a lot of money. But anyway, so I'm going to do that in a minute. But Worthwhile Magazine, which I think is a really neat project you took on a couple of years ago. Tell us about that and what led you to start Worthwhile Magazine. If folks are interested, the link there, or the website is worthwhile-magazine.com. But what's the reason for that, and how did you decide to found that with your friend?
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be able to share with your viewers about Worthwhile Magazine. That is a project I started a number of years ago with my good friend and fellow appraiser, Courtney Ahlstrom Christy of Ahlstrom Appraisals, which is based in Georgia. And we both love to write, and we are very passionate about bringing access to information about our field that traditionally has been pretty opaque to most people in the general public. And so a lot of people don't have the opportunity to learn things that would really help them make better decisions about the objects in their lives. And so we both, we've been talking about it for a very long time, and Courtney said, let's just do it. So we created a free online magazine, which is called Worthwhile Magazine. There's no subscription. It's online right at the link that's on the screen there, and it includes a huge variety of content, both written by us and a broad range of contributors. We're always looking for contributors. So if anybody watching this is interested in contributing, please reach out to us. And it's the goal is to make this information accessible so that it can empower people to make informed decisions and open up that conversation about connoisseurship. So we've published about appraising, about collecting, about art, about, you know, using antiques in your life, how you can integrate them into your interiors and your modern life, all sorts of things, interviews with artists, different allied professionals in the art and antique fields. And so it has been so much fun. I completely geek out over the analytics. I love seeing, okay, who's reading what? And it, you know, we have readers from all over the world. And it's so exciting because my goal was always, I want to help people. I want them to be able to take these kernels of information that traditionally you have to be in the field to know, and you have to have years and years of education to know, and give people access to something that is really going to help them make a better choice in their specific situation and in their life. And so that they can have that peace of mind knowing they made an informed decision and it was the right decision for their situation. And it just absolutely makes my day. Sometimes I get emails from readers saying, I found this article, and then, you know, I didn't buy that fake painting, and thank you for writing it. And it's like, oh, that's why I did this from the beginning. So it's just, you know, it's always a joy working with Courtney. We have very similar approaches to things, and it's one of the most rewarding projects that we've ever done. From the beginning, it needed to be fun. We wanted to approach it from a perspective of fun, and it's been fun and very organic and natural. And to see it grow and increase its reach in helping people has just been so rewarding.
That's awesome. So you said you like to look at the analytics. What's the most obscure country you've had somebody log into so far? Do you know?
Everywhere, I think. I mean, you know, I don't know of a place that we haven't had a hit from. You know, we don't have any readers in Antarctica. I think that's about it.
Really? That's impressive. And then what's been the most popular story on your magazine, on your website?
It really depends on where our content is and where we're marketing it, but we definitely have some perennial favorites. And we've tried to, along with our features and our interviews and our perspectives from different people in the field, kind of include a lot of how-tos. Like I've been working my way through the appraisal how-tos, like how to get an insurance appraisal, what are the different levels of value, and we have contributions from some other amazing writers who are working with us that we've published. And I find that it tends to be the how-tos that answer these, you know, deeply needed questions, and so those get a lot of traffic, like how to use a catalog raisonné, so that you know, people now know how to, you know, they can follow the article step by step and figure it out for their situation and make a better choice.
Very cool. Yeah, when I've done how-tos before, they usually go really, really well. I think my most popular is something about how to look at antique frames.
Yes,
because
that's a good one.
Frames are so different than paintings and prints, but they're integral to at least the presentation and sometimes the value too. So, and people do love the how-tos. So that's really cool. It's a really great magazine, folks. If you have a minute, you're interested in any of this, you know, connoisseurship of antiques and personal property and the things that you own, worthwhilemagazine.com has some great information there for you. So let's talk about what we started talking about before. You can right button here. All of a sudden I'm missing things. Let's talk about Silver 101. If I can find, there we go, Silver 101. And what led you, so you created this online course, which is a really interesting idea in the antique world, right? In the appraisal world, there's not many out there. So what led you to design it and create it? What was the inspiration behind that?
Thank you, Jason. And it really came from years and years of sitting in people's dining rooms across the table from them, working with them on their silver and helping them figure out what they had, teaching them how to learn themselves what they had. And that moment of discovery where the light bulb goes off and they go, oh, and then they start saying, well, this is sterling, right? And this is silver plate. And because I sat there and taught them how to figure that out, and they're so excited and so empowered. So I've been doing that in my appraisal firm for years because I have a specialty in silver. So it's an object category I appraise quite a lot. And each time I kind of honed this process through many, many client assignments where it was a pain point I was always seeing. People have, you know, the boxes and boxes they've inherited, or it was, you know, from a grandparent, or they just haven't been dealing with it. And they're scared of throwing something out that's important. They're feeling like, well, I don't really even know what I have, so I don't know if I'm doing right by it. And it's just generally an object type that, because it is so difficult to figure out if you don't have the training, it prompts a lot of anxiety. And so through working with specific clients through the years, I developed my own little process for how to teach them and empower them, so that not only am I showing them what they have, they also leave that time with me feeling like they can move forward better discerning what they have. And it was just so fun for me to see how excited people would get, and the sense of relief. And then they could say, oh, well, I can do this with this piece and this with this piece. And they're making informed decisions that for their situation, they feel really good about. And so I love that process. But then I thought, I can't go sit in everyone's dining room. This is not practical. There aren't enough of me. And also it's, there's so many more people who, aren't in my particular region of Virginia. I wanted to be able to take that process that I'd seen work again and again and accomplish a really positive outcome and make it available to anybody, anywhere. And I actually had started working on this before the pandemic, but then when the pandemic hit, it's like, okay, I'm finishing this. This is going to happen. So that really deepened my passion for creating this, because I'd been following the business world and the rise of the online course in the business world. And I thought, well, why can't I do this? Because it seemed to me that this process, and this could work for many different object types, not just silver, it really is deeply needed for people who are in areas that don't have experts like you or like me, or people who perhaps, in the pandemic, they can't meet with someone in person because it may not be safe for them. So I really wanted to take this process and make it accessible anywhere.
Well, and you brought up a couple of points I want to touch on. You love sitting at the table with people looking through their silver, but you charge for that. Like that's, yeah. And so you can help people. The course to me is a great way for people to learn, but also it's a great value for them in that for $50, they can learn about it. And then when they talk to you or an appraiser or an auctioneer, they know they have sterling or silver plate, and have a better idea of what those things may or may not be worth or the interest of the marketplace. So it's a great value as well. And I think it's so important to offer people value like you've been doing. So you were going to say something.
Oh, I was going to say, I really appreciate you highlighting that point, because that was a major factor in why I did it as well. Yeah, at $50, it's a lot less than it would cost to work with me otherwise, or pretty much any other appraiser in America otherwise. So yeah, and so I am all about expanding access to information, as you probably have gathered by now. And so I wanted to make something that was at a very affordable price point that would give people the information they needed to be able to discern, do they need somebody like me? Or perhaps they have 100% silver plate in their collections, which sadly has happened before in some client calls in the past. And I do not like going out and, not being able to find anything to justify my time going there. And so I really wanted to have a filter where people could, figure out what they have and then figure out what's going to make sense for them for the next step. And, the course may be a one-stop shop for someone, or they may decide, wow, I have this fabulous, 16th century collection of silver. I really need to go call an appraiser. So it helps them make a better choice depending on their situation.
Or you can call an auction house. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
I would love to get that phone call. So we're talking about the course. We talked about, you designed it for people who are just curious about it or don't know anything about the things they've inherited. What if somebody goes to your Silver 101, what can someone expect to find? What are some of the, the top, how did you create the course, and what did you have, and what should people expect when they go there?
Sure, thank you. That's a great question. It was surprisingly hard to create the course because, as you well know, silver is such a vast and incredibly complicated topic with all of these nooks and crannies and connoisseurship that you can get lost in if you're somebody like me. And so distilling that for a general audience to be the amount of information that was useful, but not too much information, not more information than somebody really wants. That was really, really hard. And it was a great intellectual challenge. So in terms of how the content is structured, I have it divided into modules. So I have an introduction explaining how all the modules are going to work and the content in each one. Then module 1 is how to tell between sterling silver and silver plate, which is one of the biggest pain points I found with clients for how, you have all these silvery colored things. What are they? How do you tell? So I go through that systematically. And then because silver is different across different countries of production, then I divided it into the main countries that I see in silver that I'm appraising here in America to kind of access the most commonly encountered categories for people. So module 1 is American silver and also Mexican silver. Module 2 is I've got British silver, I have French, German, and Russian silver, and then also through all of that, because they have different marks for each country, then in each specific module for the country, I talk about how to read the marks for those countries. And then finally, once everybody knows what they have, then I talk about how people can safely store their silver and silver plate, because that is also a really important consideration, because you can absolutely ruin your sterling if you aren't storing it in the right conditions for what silver needs. And that's also another thing that's not commonly known outside of the field. So, you know, I would need for someone to figure out what they have, get really excited, and then put it away for safekeeping in a way that's going to end up harming or destroying it. So I felt like that was really important to responsibly close the lesson with, now that you know, here's how you can keep it safe. And I am all about the stories behind objects, as my business name, Artifactual History, might indicate. And so I also have included a lot of plug and play templates where, you know, people can download and just start typing, or if they prefer to handwrite, they can print and start handwriting, where people can catalog their pieces, and they can also record the family stories and family memories, because often I have this the great privilege of hearing some amazing family stories. And then I usually say, oh, you know, what does your son say about this? What does your daughter say about this? Oh, I haven't told him. You know, so I really want to get those prompts where these pieces can be preserved down the line. And also because it adds to value sometimes, depending on what the family story is. It's an important part of the provenance of the piece. So I have that as an extra kind of support for people as part of the course content that they get when they go and purchase the course.
So they get the information on how to identify. They get an inventory management system. Is that what you're saying?
More or less. It's not a software, but it's if you are a person who likes to catalog, you know, and how you can just basically have as many of these guidelines, you know, little guides that I've created that you can use to fill in, and then just have them all as a file where they're all together. So you have your inventory there.
Well, that's very cool. That's something we've toyed about doing here for our clients and customers as well, as giving them that option, because everybody's on their computer. And so why not give them the access to the information in the places they're already going, which I think is a great thing. And then you also give them tips and ideas on how to store and display. And I'm assuming you tell people to use their silver, right? Because it wasn't made to sit in a drawer.
Yes, exactly. And that's, a lot of my clients, they express concern that, you know, someone down the line isn't going to want to keep a particular piece that's really important to them, but, you know, they're worried that someone else might not consider it important. And I say, oh, did you use it at Thanksgiving? Did you use it for this? Oh, no, it's been in this box for 30 years. So I always say, use it. You have to create those memories so that people have the associations that this is a treasured object for you. And then they end up associating it with you, or, you know, you have to convey to them very clearly, it's important to me for these reasons. And so that's a big part of where my provenance prompt for that sheet came from, that often you don't, in a family, you don't know why something's important. So you don't grasp that meaning until somebody tells you why it's important to them. And then it can be imbued with a whole new level of association. So this is, you know, clearly not the financial side of value, which is what I do on the surface, but I think those other sides of value are just as important and sometimes can have a more lasting impact on people in terms of the time I spend working with a client.
Well, and part of, you know, there's, as you know, as an appraiser, there are dozens of value basis points in any conversation, but one of the value things is the emotional, the familial, and we talk about this regularly. Use the china, break the crystal, because it's the stories with the objects that are way more important than the objects themselves, generally speaking, in an estate situation.
Yes.
And like you said, if it's in a box in the drawer, that's not important. It might be sacred, but it's not important. And nobody understands sacredness. They understand important. And using it, displaying it, sharing it with your family is so important to keeping that legacy alive.
And it's that active sacredness. It's the using it and saying it's important why, and I'm continuing this tradition. And yeah, you had an amazing guest on your show a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Britt Frank. I was having the best time listening to her wisdom about estate trauma, because I completely agree with her perspective. And I think that level and the very deep psychological undercurrents to objects, I like to call them memory grenades. That's what I call objects, because it looks so innocent sitting there, and then it just kind of blows up with all of these memories, both happy and sad, depending on your particular situation. And I find it useful to look at objects both from the literal side of what I do as an appraiser, but to understand that there's another perspective as well, and that it's very vivid for my clients. And a part of my role, I feel like, is to be respectful of that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I put it the Greenhouse KC Britt's website. Yeah, that's probably my most important interview I've done so far, talking about estate trauma and the estate traumas for both the family inheriting and those giving. Because if it's not important to the kids, it's really discouraging and disheartening to the person who's kept it for all those years, and really important conversation. So let's go back to talking about your course a little bit. You talked about creating it beforehand. Now, I mentioned before, there's not a lot of courses out there in regards to antiques, appraisal, artwork, estate, distribution, liquidation, those kinds of things. Are you working on more projects?
Yes, I am.
That was just a blind question. And then also, where do you see the industry going? Do you see others doing work in that field, in that space, or is it pretty limited yet?
At the moment, I'm not aware of many people doing things like that. I think you're very innovative in what you do, Jason. So there are a few of us out there who are really utilizing technology to do some creative things and spread the word. But at the moment, I'm not aware of too many other people doing what I'm doing. And yes, I am working on more. Actually, the next course I'm working on is based on this ties into the estate trauma we were talking about. Because I often, a huge group of clients I work with are people who are dealing with the material life of a loved one or a family member. And it's extremely stressful and overwhelming. And a lot of the people who reach out to me, they are very concerned about doing right by this loved one and their memory and what they know, the things they know were important to them, but they're not sure why. And so that's where I often come in on, helping them discern, these are the things you should probably worry about. These are the things you don't need to worry about. Or if they have a really special memory, enjoy them. But there aren't many systematic guides for how to move through this. And there's both the practical level and the connoisseurship level, and then the emotional level. So the next course I'm working on is a course that it provides support to people who are finding themselves having to deal with either their own things. A lot of people are, especially with the pandemic, starting to look around and going, I think I need to downsize. But also especially for people who are burdened with having to deal with the practical and logistical and emotional issues of handling someone else's things.
Yeah, that's really cool stuff. I want to say, Linda Hyatt says hello, friends. We've had Linda's watching, Donna, Deb, Jason, Phyllis, Jackie, a bunch of other people watching on my other station. When I'm looking to my left just to see, because I'm having a broadcasting on two different things, I have to look in different places. If you are watching and you have questions, go ahead and post them. We're going to wrap up in just a few minutes, but I know that Sarah will be available afterwards to answer questions, as will I. I check these messages all the time. You've watched some of our shows. You've seen that I like to end the show by talking about you a little bit more. And if you're interested in finding out more about Sarah and Artifactual History, you can find her or her company on LinkedIn, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram. Artifactualhistory.com has links to a lot of the information we talked about. Worthwhile Magazine, her Silver 101 course is there. If you want to reach out to her specifically, you can always email her info@afhappraisal.com or a phone number 703-543-2567. And now we come to the part of the show that some people hate, some people love. Tell me anything you want to tell me. Give you a couple minutes to talk about the appraisal industry, the auction industry, your dog, whatever. Just a couple of minutes for you to talk about anything that's important to you in this conversation, and maybe things that are coming up or whatever you want to talk about. But just a couple of minutes for you, Sarah, and take it away.
Thank you. Well, yes, I did my homework, so I was prepared for this question. It's a fabulous question. I love that you give your guests the opportunity to answer this. And yes, the dog is in my lap. She is not going to make a cameo on screen, but she's here. And
you can't mention a dog and not show the dog. Let's see the dog.
Okay.
Didn't even know you had a dog. That was another randomness.
Screen debut. But I would love to talk about the industry overall, not just appraising, but the auction world, the gallery world. I think we're at this amazing liminal moment where we can accomplish so much, and I'm really hopeful for the future of what's possible. But I think it all depends on us reaching for the best version of ourselves rather than the scarcity mindset. So I personally am really excited to connect with people who are entering the field. I think there are some amazing people who are this next generation of our field. I love talking with them and kind of giving my advice whenever possible. And I hope that we as a field welcome them and realize that we're all stronger when we can incorporate these new members, new backgrounds. A lot of them have amazing academic backgrounds that they bring to it, and to utilize technology too. This process of making the online course just deepened my commitment to exploring more formats for reaching people. And now that the world has kind of collapsed and expanded through the pandemic, I am working remotely with clients more than ever. I have clients all over America now, which is really exciting. So I think a lot of our limitations that we used to have in kind of the before times, as people say, they're not necessarily the things that have been constraints during the pandemic. We can pivot them and use them to make the field stronger overall. So I'm personally really hopeful and excited for seeing how all the different facets of our broader field can approach each other with a more friendly attitude and realize that we all make each other stronger and collaborate for the greatest good and to help our end users, our clients. So that's something a vision that I really hope can be achieved in the future. And I'm excited to personally work to build towards that.
Oh, that's exciting. And I think what you're doing with the material you're providing people on your website and the course you already have and the course you have coming in the future, I'm really excited to see that information available, because it makes our job easier and it makes us better at our jobs if our clients and customers understand what we're talking about. Because every industry has its own lingo, right? And we don't even know we have it until we talk to people outside of it. And more often than not, they just nod and act like they know, but they don't. And that's where confusion comes in, and that's where problems arise. And I think anytime we can do something to alleviate those issues, it helps our industry across the board. So thank you so much for putting all that work into what you have going on.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so again, thanks so much for everybody for watching Behind the Gavel with Jason today. We love coming to you every week. If you have questions for me or my company, you always reach us at info@kcauctioncompany.com. If you have questions you want to talk to us about, 816-283-3633. And of course, you can find all of our information at our website at kcauctioncompany.com. If you ever have questions for us, if you have ideas of guests who you think would be interesting to talk to, or questions you want to address, please let us know. Sarah, thank you so much again for joining us today. I hope things are safe and good in Virginia. I lived in the Alexandria, Virginia area for a while, loved it. I'm sure you know the Quinn boys over there in Falls Church. I used to work with them quite a bit when I was living in the area. And I miss that area greatly. My wife and I had a great time living in Alexandria. But thanks again so much for joining us, and hope to work with you in the future with Worthwhile, with us, and everything else you have coming up.
Thank you, Jason. It's really an honor. I appreciate being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we'll see everybody next Friday. Next Friday, I forgot to mention, Ariana Bethea from Dressing Rooms Interior Studios, another East Coast guest. She has a brick and mortar vintage and design. So we're going to talk about what she's been working with and through during the pandemic, and also her business before and after. I'm pretty excited about that. Again, Sarah, have a great evening, great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.